Good afternoon. On behalf of the University of Arizona, I would like to welcome you to this featured event during a week-long opening of the university's DC Center for Outreach and Collaboration. My name is Marla Franco, and I serve as the Assistant Vice Provost for Hispanic Serving Institution Initiatives. Today, we have gathered representatives from a very small but important group. Nationally, there are 66 universities affiliated with the Association of American Universities, higher education institutions known for earning the majority of competitively awarded federal funding for academic research. In addition to this very important characteristic, only 4 of them are Hispanic serving institutions. Conceiving this designation in a way that far exceeds meeting an enrollment metric, we ask ourselves the following question: how do we, as members of the AAU, actualize our HSI designation in a way that brings about greater equity-focused innovation, scholarship, and solutions that are responsive to the needs of the Hispanic community? I often say that with great honor comes great responsibility. A responsibility to leverage these 2 shared institutional characteristics as AAU-member HSIs to produce both research that matters and to graduate diverse students who are prepared to be the scientific leaders and innovators for their communities, our states, and our nation. We are honored that today's conversation will be moderated by AAU President Dr. Barbara Snyder, who will engage our panelists who represent each of the 4 AAU member HSIs. We are joined by 2 in person and 1 virtually. Robert Robbins, President of the University of Arizona, Cynthia Larive, Chancellor at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and Sharon Tediga, Associate Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the University of California, Santa Barbara. We look forward to taking your questions and comments from our virtual and in-person audience towards the end of our session today. But before we get started with our panel discussion, I would like to invite Emmanuel Cadillo, Senior Advisor with the White House Initiative on Advancing Educational Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity, to share a few remarks with us as we start our conversation today. Emmanuel?
Well, thank you so much, Marla, for the kind introductions. And good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here with you today, especially with great guests and leaders of some of our HSIs that have received that affiliation with the AAU. At the White House Initiative on Advancing Educational Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity for Hispanics, we know the limitless potential of the Hispanic community. Recently, the census showed that there are 62 million Hispanics living in this country. And in our most recent figures, there's nearly 4 million Hispanics that attend college. And 2/3 of that number attend an HSI. So HSIs play a critical role in not just the education, but also the development of our future workforce. Our HSIs are located all throughout the country, including in Puerto Rico. And they each all play an important role. But I'm excited to be here today in order to hear the conversations of HSIs that have reached this designation, because these are the top research universities in our country. And it's important that we be able to discuss how our institutions could serve our Hispanic students. Each year, more and more Hispanic students are coming into post-secondary education. And even while in a pandemic, we also have to work even harder to ensure that we're able to say that college is a viable option, and also to our students to say, remain in school, complete your degree. And so here at the White House Initiative, we look forward to working with each HSIs in order to work together to see how we could work with our students to ensure that college remains affordable to each student, so they don't have to worry about what they have to pay. To ensure that we guide our students, especially our first generation students who may not know the college landscape, guide them to full completion and be able to earn the degree. We also want to make sure that we work together to ensure there's opportunities for hands-on work experience. These are our internships, our fellowships, externships, research assistantships with some of our top researchers on campus, to ensure our Hispanic students have that experience, so when you put them all together, they're able to compete for our top jobs out there. HSIs play a big role also in regards to social mobility. That's the great thing about our HSIs, is that students who attend a four-year HSIs had a mobility income rate 3 times that of students that don't attend a non-HSI. That's huge. That shows the important role of HSIs to our students. And so we must double our efforts to work together to ensure that we are able to give the opportunity to our students for them to succeed. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we look very much forward to working with each and every one of you at the White House Initiative to see where things that we could share, best practices, see where gaps are at so we're able to address them. But more importantly, encourage our students to not just attend college, but to complete college and watch them succeed, because the Hispanic community success is America's success. Thank you so much, Marla, and thank you so much, everybody, for this opportunity to address you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for your work and your promise in working with us. We look forward to collaboration both here for AAU HSIs as well as the 569 HSIs across the nation. Thank you so much. We are incredibly honored to have the AAU president, Dr. Barbara Snyder, with us this afternoon. We look forward to engaging in conversation with you, Dr. Snyder. You'll be moderating today's panel discussion, but before that occurs, we look forward to hearing a little bit about AAU's engagement around diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Dr. Snyder?
Thank you, Marla. Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Hispanic American Heritage Month. My thanks to President Robert Robbins and his colleague, of course, Marla Franco, and the University of Arizona for convening this important discussion in this beautiful place and for inviting me to help facilitate it. Thanks also to Chancellor Cindy LaRive from the University of California, Santa Cruz, and the teams from UC Irvine and UC Santa Barbara for agreeing to be part of today's conversation, and more importantly, for committing to be part of the conversation going forward, because this isn't going to be over with our conversation today, I assure you. As the nation's leading research universities, AAU members hold a special place of leadership in global higher education. This is true not only when it comes to scientific research, but also with regard to some important questions about that research. Who is conducting it, and who is benefiting from that research? That's why the topic of today's discussion is so crucial. AAU universities should be leaders in ensuring that people from all walks of life, from all parts of our society, are integral parts of and equal beneficiaries of the cutting-edge research that our universities conduct every day. As we're all aware, our nation is in the midst of a long overdue national reckoning over systemic racial inequities. AAU and our member universities have been among the institutions struggling with the questions regarding racial justice that are now front and center for all Americans. As the Association for America's Leading Research Universities, AAU has an obligation to lead in the conversation about how we might address systemic racism that permeates every corner of our society. We've been working on several fronts to address that racial inequity in a number of ways. First, by raising awareness about institutional efforts to diversify student bodies and faculties that's happening on our campuses. Also, to make sure that they create welcoming and inclusive educational spaces. And we see that happening also every day. I'm proud of what our member campuses are doing. And to really begin to address structural inequities in academia. And this is really challenging. We believe in promoting racial justice and broader diversity in the academy, not simply because it is the right thing to do, it is, of course, but also because it's the smart thing to do. We know that the best research happens when the best minds are in the room, and we need to make sure that that is always true. Racial equity in the classroom, as well as in the research lab, is one of the ways that we can make a difference at AAU, and one of the reasons that we established our AAU initiatives in undergraduate education and graduate education. Diversifying the classroom and the laboratory are also central to another aspect of racial justice that we'll talk about more today, ensuring that the benefits of research are shared equitably and that historically underserved communities don't get short shrift as they have in the past. Minority serving institutions are central to that effort to diversify the classroom and ultimately our nation's entire research enterprise. While currently no historically black colleges and universities are AAU members, we do count proudly 4 Hispanic serving institutions among our membership. As you heard, those include our hosts at the University of Arizona and 3 of the UC campuses, UC Irvine, Santa Barbara, and Santa Cruz. I look forward to learning more about what these great universities are doing, how they are serving their Hispanic students, how they're working to ensure that our nation's research enterprise is more equitable from the classroom to the lab, and ultimately to the patent office and the doctor's office and in companies across the country. So with that, I'm ready to get started. Is this working? Okay. Am I going to stay here or move? Oh, I was too fast for them. That happens to me frequently. All right, Cindy and Bobby, ready to go.
Do we have institution status that the University of Arizona recently was awarded is something that's very important to the university for several reasons. First of all, it's a culmination of really a decade or more of work by many people at the university. Long before I arrived, I just got to come to the party for celebration. And the reason it's so important is it really validates that we're an institution that not only has a large Latinx and Hispanic population of students, but it means that we're serving those students. We recently also got the seal of excellence from Excelencia in Education, which was a very competitive process. It was the inaugural seal for serving Latinx and Hispanic students. And that means that we're now open for federal grants and other philanthropic and foundation support that we wouldn't have had before. Secondly, it means that students will want to come to the University of Arizona because of this designation, and it helps us with attracting students because they understand that we're an institution that's committed to helping them realize their hopes and dreams. Finally, it's a big part of our strategic plan. We're putting resources and commitments to not only rest on our laurels by getting the HSI designation, but by keeping it and by growing it and being really a model for the rest of the United States. As demographics change and as the country grows, we at University of Arizona is what other institutions are going to look like 10, 20, 30 years from now. So it gives us a chance to have validation of what we've been doing for years, gives us new energy and resources to help our students and our faculty and our staff. That's another thing that's important with this designation. It allows us the opportunity to recruit the brightest and best faculty and staff to come and serve these students. So I think all in all, it's a tremendous accomplishment for the university, something we should all be proud of. And as I said, I realize that I'm on third base, but I didn't hit a triple. I'm just a pinch runner, but I'm happy to hopefully get the run across the plate and help us be the real model for serving our Latinx and Hispanic students.
Well, I would love for each of you to introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about how you came to your leadership roles. So let me start with our host, President Robbins, and tell us about your discipline too.
Well, I just saw that video and I needed to have a tie on and have gotten a haircut before I did that. But here I am today with a haircut and tie on. So I came to the University of Arizona, as I say, I'm a rising fifth-year senior, so I'm starting my fifth year, and previously spent time at Stanford, and I'm a recovering heart surgeon.
And Chancellor LaRive.
Thank you, Barbara. So I've been at UC Santa Cruz for about 2 years. I started my career at the University of Kansas as a bioanalytical chemist, and then moved to UC Riverside in 2005, and was most recently at Riverside the Provost Executive Vice Chancellor before moving to Santa Cruz.
And I think we have Dr. Tedga from UC Santa Barbara. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us how you came to your leadership role?
Oh, thank you so very much. I'm very excited about being here and being a part of this today. I actually started here at UC Santa Barbara about 3 years ago, and I'm currently the Associate Vice Chancellor of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I'm brand new in the role. I've held other leadership positions. I was at Champaign-Urbana, where I was the chair of a program. I've also been at the National Science Foundation as a program officer, as well as Associate Dean for Research at UNLV. And I came to it because I'm passionate about these things. I'm passionate about, represented communities and how we can help to educate them. My background is in educational psychology, but I've been involved with STEM education research for more than 20 years.
Thank you. That's great. Well, let me throw the first question out to all of you and ask you each to say something about what your institutions are doing to help improve really quality of life for the Hispanic community. We got to see your video, Bobby, but Cindy, maybe we can start with you on that, and you can give us a little introduction to what's going on at UC Santa Cruz.
Oh, thank you. So we have many things going on at UC Santa Cruz, both to increase the equity of our Latinx and BIPOC students in the classroom, but also in their overall educational experience at UC Santa Cruz. We know that undergraduate research is a best practice in training undergraduates, but also is a pathway for undergraduate students to graduate school and ultimately into careers either in industry, in the government or private sector, and as future faculty, so we take great pride in helping to train the future professors at UC Santa Cruz and in the UC system. The way that we interface with our community is through a variety of mechanisms. Our Educational Partnership Center, which is embedded in many of the schools of Santa Cruz County, including in Watsonville, which is in the Pajaro Valley, an agricultural center not far from Salinas. We also have community-based research in which our faculty and students take research questions out into the community, and through those engagements, not only help to advance really important research questions, but also help our community partners and members understand the value of research and how it can affect people's lives.
And Dr. Tedga, let me turn to you next to talk about what you're doing at UC Santa Barbara.
We are doing a lot of different things. I think that As you all know, it's hard to realize commitments, but like most institutions, we have a long way to go. But we have a variety of research programs as well as service programs, student programs. We have the Center for Publicly Engaged Scholarship. We have partnerships with the local Latinx and Hispanic community on needs of healthcare. We have many of the other academic and, again, student service programs. We have a Chicanx Latinx Resource Center. We have CSEP, which is the Center for Science and Engineering Partnerships. We have Office of Education Partnership. I could probably go on and name so many programs that we have established here around serving the HSI and Latinx community.
And President Robbins.
Well, I think most of what I had to say was in the video, but I'll provide some color commentary to it. You know, it's been a long journey for the University of Arizona to achieve HSI designation. As I said, there have been innumerable people working for decades to achieve this, and we achieved this in designation in 2018. And I want to thank Provost Folks for having the wisdom to appoint Dr. Franco as a Vice Provost for HSI initiatives, and she has done a tremendous job of leading us over the past several years. It was embedded in our strategic plan from when I arrived to support this work, and also with development of leadership opportunities for both faculty and our staff. Dr. Franco and Dr. Folks recruited Dr. Judy Marquez Kiyama, who I think Judy's here, I saw her somewhere earlier in the week. And she's done a great job of helping to develop our faculty. And then, you know, Marla's great work in achieving the 2019 Excellencia Award, and then in 2020 being recognized by the Hispanic Association for Colleges and Universities as its outstanding member. So there are a lot of things that are being done at a large level. Dr. Franco has also organized all of the HSIs in Arizona to come together, and that's very beneficial in terms of sharing better practices around what we can do to serve our students better. But I couldn't be more proud of the work that's been going on for decades at the University of Arizona, and this official recognition, as I said in the video, helps to accelerate and is a force multiplier for this important work for our students.
Well, don't worry, your pride shines through. We can all tell for all of you that you take great pride in these programs, and it's wonderful. I think now that we've been joined by Doug Haynes, Dr. Haynes from UC Irvine, also an HSI from the AAU. So we want to ask you to address our first question, which is, what are some of the things that you're doing at UC Irvine to help improve quality of life for Hispanic communities?
Thank you so much, President Snyder, and I want to add my thanks for the invitation to join in this conversation. We started, I think, a process of becoming a Latinx thriving university as part of our effort to establish our readiness to secure designation as a Hispanic Serving Institution. And so that initiative consists of three large enterprise-wide pillars: creating a pathway to the American dream, and that includes our undergraduate participation, graduate student participation, and faculty participation. The second focuses on promoting the cultural and social capital of Latinx communities. We are in Orange County, where the general population is approximately 40% Latino. And we feel that we have a unique responsibility as a research institution to engage in that activity, but also to connect the ways in which a research university really contributes to the value of thriving. And then the third area also aligns with our role as a research institution, really to transform the professoriate and knowledge workforce of the future. And so there's a lot of cross-cutting activities that really support this idea of a Latinx thriving university. I think first and foremost, I think is outreach. And that outreach we've been engaged in for decades. And in truth, it's one reason why we were able to double the enrollment of Latinx undergraduates over a 15-year period. That outreach is also a type of intervention that we're pretty aggressive in when it comes to diversifying our graduate student population. And so since 2010, we've had what's called a decade program to diversify the graduate student population. And so far, we've made very, I think, encouraging progress. Right now, Latinos constitute approximately 15% of our doctoral student population, an even larger share when we just focus on domestic doctoral students. And they are represented across nearly 50 doctoral programs at UCI. It's particularly important both for undergraduates and graduates not simply to enroll, but to graduate with the idea of thriving. And for that reason, we have a team of about 50 faculty decade mentors in each of our doctoral programs to serve as really advocates for inclusive excellence. They meet with the admissions committee to share data, to review outcomes, as well as to sort of share best practices, not only for admitting students, but also to create an environment for students to thrive. It's noteworthy, about 1/3 of our graduate students were first generation students when they were undergraduates. And so many of the efforts to create a culture for students to thrive as undergraduates, we also are developing at the graduate student level. We also are fairly aggressive in using the UC President's Postdoctoral Fellowship Program, an amazing program that really selects the nation's most promising early career researchers and scholars for a year or two as a postdoc, and they become eligible for the hiring incentive. And that's proven to be a terrific ecosystem for growing the future professoriate of UCI. We've also sort of launched through our School of Humanities a cluster hiring program. And so when you sort of put all these elements together with our research activity that really is directed at Latinx communities, I think we really are trying to create that momentum to be a thriving Latinx university. Because I think that is the sort of the future of higher education.
Thank you. It is great about all the programs that are going on. I hear an echo. Oh, I think it's better now. All the programs that are going on across our AAU HSIs. I want to turn to talk about the student experience from the student perspective now, not just what, the programs that are out there that you've all described beautifully, but what it is like to be, let's start with undergraduate students. Is it special for a Hispanic undergraduate student to be going to college at an HSI? Anybody who wants to can take that one first.
Well, I can jump in.
Cindy, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I think it is both special and it is also not unique. So our universities really thrive in supporting our Latinx students. We support them through a number of programs, through cultural centers, and through mentorship. It's important for them to see mentors and role models, both peer mentors and faculty and staff mentors as well. But at the same time, we're both an HSI and also an Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander institution. We have more than 57% of our undergraduate students who we think of as first generation, new generation students. They're first generation in their families to go to school. They are members of underrepresented communities and or Pell Grant eligible, so from lower income families. And all of those characteristics mean that more than half of our student body falls into one or more of those categories. So it's really inspiring to serve those students and to create pathways and help remove barriers. We're focused on removing equity gaps and improving our graduation and retention rates so that all of our students can thrive while they're at UC Santa Cruz. And we're proud to have a Department of Ed GANAS Careers Grant that's focused on collaborations with employers to make sure that our students have the skills and the right networks to be able to thrive when they become our alumni and enter the workforce or move on to graduate or professional school.
Okay. Doug, did you want to go next?
And I know this is not a surprise to any of you, but this is a real, I think, significant moment in higher education in the United States, where 1 out of 4 students identify as Latino or Hispanic. And I think what's noteworthy, at least at UCL, and I would imagine at other participating institutions, is that we're trying to create a culture of belonging, where students feel that they not only belong, but they can thrive. And that takes many forms. That takes the significant array of cultural affirming programming, from Bienvenido to our LEAD program, where we recognize Latinx achievement and excellence in graduate education, to, of course, Hispanic Heritage Month, but also Cesar Chavez Day. And so all of these efforts are really designed to create a sense of belonging at an institution that has only become an HSI about 5.5 years ago. And so we're still learning how to transform the culture, but we're engaged in a lot of activity to create that belongingness, because I think students thrive when they feel they belong.
Yes, that Doug has brought up the notion of belonging. Every institution is different, and definitely what we need are role models, as well as an acceptance of the diverse epistemologies, and how we come to know things, how we come to be in the world, and what we value. And I believe with all the institutions, what we really focus on is what are the goals that we have for students. That's why we have the Chicano Studies Institute. We have the Department of Chicano Studies. And many of the students come to this campus to be in these programs and to participate in the various over 33 as well student-led programs. We have to remember that designations do not change campus experiences. And I think that we have to clarify, and I think we do a really good job at UCSB on clarifying what it means to invest and be committed to Latinx, Chicanx, and Hispanic in terms of faculty, students, and staff. I feel like we provide excellent undergraduate student support services by staff, and we send the students in their own solutions. Program for students that's led by students, is for students, in the way that we're connecting to students' diverse epistemologies, the ontologies and axiologies, so what we value and who they are. Because as we know, there's a lot of diversity within the Hispanic communities. And I think that we have to create unique experiences for each of these communities, because it's so important that we don't just homogenize groups, that we actually give them that individual attention that they need where they can thrive. And I feel like UC Santa Barbara is doing a great job with the various programs that we have on our campus that help to support them, not just in terms of their academic success, but also in terms of their socio-emotional success. And I just can see this getting better over time as we increase our number of faculty. We currently have an iChange initiative where we're looking at development of strategic goals that are geared towards diversifying the faculty within STEM fields and beyond. And I believe that these things are going to create the strategic as well as institutional roadmaps that would really help us address the needs of these diverse communities in terms of Hispanic groups.
Undergraduate experience for students at U of A.
We all share in the same experiences by and large. And just to remind everyone, the S in HSI is for serving. And we're all very proud of the service that we provide to our students to help them through, oftentimes for many of these students being first generation and not having the support to be able to navigate through an intimidating place like the University of Arizona or one of your universities. But I want to go back to what I said at the outset, that achieving the designation only a few years ago was based on decades of work by our community. And we're very proud to have the HSI designation, but I'll take you back over 5 decades ago to a program that I learned about soon after arriving to campus called New Start. And there are many people in this room, and there are many leaders and professors at the University of Arizona who've gone through the New Start program that was started really with no support from administration, or certainly not from the state, but through grassroots donations and a few people who believed and saw the opportunity to help our students. Started out locally, primarily Latinx and Hispanic students from the South Side, but it's grown to be a program that I think has really informed us as we've matured to get the designation of being HSI. And Dr. Franco and many others in her team and across the university should be congratulated for all the excellent work we're doing to help our students. And I just want to highlight also, imitation is the best form of flattery. So President Drake and I have been friends for a long, long time, and there was a professor at the university who came to me with the idea, Dr. Lehman Benson from the Eller College of Management, about replicating the UC postdoctoral fellow program. So we're now embarking on our first cohort that we're going to invest in between 5 and 10 fellows to come to the University of Arizona to help us grow that pipeline. And we're happy also to be included in a consortium. I know it started with the UC system, but it's now grown, and I think in 2019 Penn State was admitted to the consortium, and University of Arizona in 2020. So we're really proud of being in that group of peer institutions, and really excited about how we can grow the pipeline for our professorate at the University of Arizona.
Well, that's actually a great transition to talk about graduate students. And I particularly want to focus on doctoral students, because several of you mentioned preparing future faculty, which is really important. We know that the Hispanic community is underrepresented among our faculty across all of our AAU members and really all of higher education broadly. And as institutions that focus on graduate education, and particularly on doctoral education, as all of our members do, because it is inextricably linked to research, we, I think, have a special obligation in that way to think about graduate education, and especially doctoral education, and our responsibilities in that regard to produce the pipeline of doctoral graduates who will be faculty at our institutions and lots of other institutions across the country. So what is it like to be, for a Latinx student to be a doctoral student at your university, and how are you supporting them? This is another place where it's not just getting them in the door, it's getting them through the door, and with that hood and that diploma, walking out with that at the end. So Sharon, why don't we start with you this time?
HSI Doctoral Diversity Initiative, which provide funding and resources, as well as the Chicano Studies Institute that also provides resources. We have the graduate division that provides resources to support graduate students here. And I think what's really good about many of the programs on UCSB's campus is that they also are working with undergraduates as well and working with faculty. So you get that continuum of mentoring and process. So they're excited about the research that will eventually hopefully lead them to take faculty positions. Our numbers are incrementally increasing, and clearly we need to do a whole lot more in terms of working with creating that, I don't know if you want to call it a pathway, but definitely ensuring that people are able to move forward from undergraduate to graduate school to get that kind of support, they get that cultural, again, that social emotional support to ensure that they are able to continue the graduate program so we don't have to worry about them dealing with issues that are often fraught with communities of color in supporting and understanding that they have different needs that others don't have when they come to these type of institutions.
What about being a doctoral student at the University of Arizona?
That was a little bit of an echo right there. Yeah, I think that, you know, obviously we all can do better in terms of graduate students. We focus so much of our attention on undergrads. And I would also say parenthetically, that sort of lost group of postdocs that we have at our institutions. But I think with Dr. Franco and Dr. Marquez Kiyami really focusing on leadership development and in the research area, Dr. Cantwell, Provost Folks, we've all tried to think of what ways can we help not only our Latinx and Hispanic students, but all of our BIPOC community, particularly I know Levi Esquera is here, who's our Senior Vice President for Native Affairs and Initiatives, really focusing on how we can help those students. And I think we heard this morning in the opening session that Dr. Casey Ukirdes, who heads up our admissions program at the university, there was a panel that talked about a couple of key elements to success. And one, especially in graduate school, is finding the right mentor and advisor. Not only in your department, but I think also outside of your department, because interdisciplinarity is so important in your development as a graduate student and ultimately as a professor. So I think some of those programs are something that we're proud of and we can do better at, and we have to invest sustainable resources to be able to make them more successful. But those are some of the things that we're doing in Arizona.
I apologize for driving the tech people crazy by bouncing around a lot, but we're going to keep bouncing. Doug, what is it like to be a doctoral student at UC Irvine? You mentioned earlier some of the things that you're already doing. But are you seeing success, and do the students, you must have some engagement with them, are they experiencing it differently as a result of the things you put in place?
That's an excellent question. And as research institutions, I mean, among many things, we are believers in data. And so we do survey both our undergraduates and graduate students about the experience of climate. And I just think that's so important because it's often difficult to get a broad sense of what the experience is like because it can change. And so one thing to keep in mind when you think about data is that the AAU, I think our ACU produced a report a couple of years ago about the combined dead load that underrepresented populations, in this case Latinos, bear as a result of their undergraduate and graduate education. And I just think being mindful of that is particularly important. And so we really make a concerted effort to lower the financial costs to pursue higher education at the doctoral level through a range of fellowship programs. Many of our graduate students receive their undergraduate training either within the University of California across the state or at a CSU, a California State University. And so one thing that we're learning and engaging with is our own existing pipeline of talented young people who self-identify as Latino or Hispanic. In addition to sort of making, lowering the barrier to the process of application, I think it's so important that we sort of scaffold success. And so for many of our students, including participating Latinx students, we have a competitive edge program that engages them at the summer before they begin their career to sort of orient them about the campus, the programming, life as a graduate student. And furthermore, again, I mentioned earlier that we have a team of about 50 faculty members who are designated decade mentors in their doctoral program. And I can't stress enough the importance of faculty leadership here, particularly at the program level, both to remind our colleagues about the broad talent pool that's out there, and that we want to mobilize that talent pool in our doctoral programs. And furthermore, that the climate is so important to address and monitor at the doctoral program level, in part because we're so highly decentralized, all of our campuses are. And so it's very important that there are faculty who are there, who are engaged in paying attention, who serve as a resource for student concerns, so that they can be a resource for them to direct them to the right solution. And finally, I think I just want to stress again that the importance of mentors. Mentors matter. They matter 10 years ago, 30 years ago, 100 years ago, and they will continue indefinitely. And we really have made a concerted effort to provide more training about what it means to be an effective mentor, right? Because we want our mentors to provide accurate information, to listen, so that our students can express their concerns or what's working. And finally, I think that an important new development is our new UCI Orange County Alliance for Latinx Thriving University. And that builds in the considerable community of Latino leaders in Orange County that come from a broad cross-section of disciplines, industries, careers that really are interested in connecting with our graduate students. Because remember, we're focusing on transforming the professor of the future as well as the knowledge workforce. And so I think this helps to sort of build an even broader ecosystem that connects UCI to Orange County and the state and the country. Thank you.
Shouldn't be focused just on the future professoriate, but the knowledge workforce. That's absolutely true for doctoral programs across the AAU and beyond. Cindy, you did talk about, though, the obligation of preparing future faculty. Yes. What are you doing at Santa Cruz to try to bring that to life for real graduate students who are on your campus today?
Well, thank you. So we have a really terrific Center for Innovations in Teaching and Learning that supports faculty, supports instructors, and supports our graduate students. So our center has really created an amazing program, and we're recently partnered with the AAU STEM initiative on this. It's to train graduate students in active learning and pedagogies of equity, to engage with students in a way that really improves undergraduate student success, moving GPAs and key gateway courses up by 1 full GPA mark while reducing DF and W rates. So it's a great outcome for our undergraduate students, but for our graduate students, it trains them in a new way to be the teachers that we'll need tomorrow, as well as the teaching assistants that we need today. And those skills, I can tell you as a bench chemist in my former career, are the same skills that are needed in industry. It's how to engage around problems, to work collaboratively, to help teams of students or teams in the laboratory solve the most important and challenging problems. So I think that if we think about the opportunities we have with graduate students who also often act as teachers as well as researchers, we can help generate the faculty and the industry leaders that our country so much needs.
Let me turn now to questions about research directly. AAU universities, of course, do a wide variety of research, but among the things that our institutions do that makes our institution special is what we call basic research, foundational research, research that doesn't necessarily have an immediate practical application, but can make a tremendous difference. And the best example I can point to right now is related to the pandemic because it's on all of our minds. AAU member universities were among the places that did the early research into RNA and its role, the messenger RNA and its role, and actually helped create the platform on which two of the vaccines were built, the platforms that the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is based on and the one that Moderna is based on. That started with basic science research at a number of places, including some very prominent AAU universities. But let me tell you what also happens. The pandemic, of course, as we know, has disproportionately affected communities of color across the country, Hispanic communities among others. Vaccine rates have been lower in those communities. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation in California, which I chose since, excuse me, Bobby, but 3 of our institutions are from California, 31% of vaccinations have gone to Hispanic people, while Hispanics account for 61% of all COVID cases in the state of California, 47% of deaths, and I think, as Doug said, 40% of the population in the state. So how do we make sure, as we think about our research going forward, that this doesn't repeat itself as it has in the past, so that these communities get to be the beneficiaries of the work we're doing? It's great to bring more of these students in, but how do we make sure the research benefits the Hispanic community in particular? Bobby, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think that, you know, the pandemic has shone a bright light on many things over the past 2 years, not the least of which is health disparities. We've known for 60 years that underserved populations have a higher incidence of cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, longevity. And I think that the pandemic has just reaffirmed what we've known. And I think it's been a great opportunity for us, particularly as land-grant AAU universities, to serve those communities. I'm particularly proud of our public health school, which is one that really got involved in the community, from mobile clinics on the border to throughout southern Arizona and Tucson, into our Phoenix Biomedical Campus in Phoenix, to serve the underserved populations, particularly when it came to, in the early days before we had a vaccine. And I would agree, the fundamental research at many AAU universities obviously led to the development of the mRNA-based vaccines that have been so effective. But getting just simple testing kits. We developed our own testing kits, actually made our own swabs, because we knew out in the desert in Tucson, we were going to be a long way away from Washington, D.C. and New York City. So we took it upon ourselves to start making our own PCR kits and doing the tests internally. And we also shared that with many of our underserved populations, and with Levi's help, really focused a lot on our Native American nations. We have 22 sovereign nations in Arizona. Getting PPE, just basic things early on in the pandemic that helped. And then we became a state-sponsored vaccination pod. So not only did we have an interest in vaccinating our own 60,000 members of our university community, but all of our southern Arizona community. and we were able in just a few short months to vaccinate over 250,000 people. So I think that it has to be intentional. It has to be part of your DNA, if you will, not your RNA, as this virus is, but your DNA, to be intentional about serving underserved communities, and it's part of our land-grant mission.
Cindy, how do we make sure that research benefits all these populations, these communities we are dedicated to serving?
Yeah, I have two comments I'd like to make. First, I wanted to acknowledge our faculty at UC Santa Cruz who work in RNA and genomics, who stood up our own COVID testing lab. We did that. We don't have a medical school, and we're in a county that is underserved medically. But we not only used that testing lab over the last year and a half to help monitor and do asymptomatic and symptomatic testing of our campus members, but to also support the community health centers of Santa Cruz County, including Salud para la Gente, which serves Watsonville in the Pajaro Valley. So that's a very real way in which we were able to bring UC Santa Cruz research to serve our community. But earlier I spoke, Barbara, about our community-based research. Our researchers taking their research projects out into the community to work with our students and community partners to understand the complex issues of homelessness, of predatory banking, of health, food insecurity, and health disparities. And through those interactions, we can help community members have more trust in university research and in the kinds of research that can help guide future health crises, should we have the next one, but also the kinds of historic inequities that President Robbins discussed.
Actually, building that trust is incredibly important, and a piece of that is also making sure that communities of color are represented in our clinical trials, because they won't sign up in the same numbers if they don't trust the people who are doing the research. So that's an essential piece of this. So Sharon, let me turn to you, and then Doug.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bring a little bit of a different perspective, and I would like to connect also to the notion of trust. We have to understand that the adage, build it and they will come, it's very ineffective. And for me, education is the key. In order to educate, we have to build that trust, because trust is the foundation for any type of relationship. And for so many communities of color, trust has been shattered through oppression, marginalization. We have to consider that one size does not fit all, and all communities of color are not the same, even within the Hispanic and Latinx groups. I just really want to point that out, because we talk about underserved. There are group differences. In fact, some individuals who are Hispanic or Latinx or Chicanx do not necessarily see themselves as underserved. And we have to acknowledge some of these things and be real clear about who is it that we're talking about in terms of the 61% of COVID cases among Hispanics. And unfortunately, the data is aggregated. So we have to start looking at intersectional data in terms of which Latinx or Hispanic communities were affected the most. Is it the underserved that we're really talking about? And if that's the case, we have to figure out a way to educate. And by disaggregating that data, it can provide a clear picture of who is truly affected. Because I think oftentimes things get confounded when you talk about the community as a whole, when the data is represented. And we're talking about individuals that often may not have access to the university. And that's why I really like, the outreach that I know that we're doing at UC Santa Barbara as well, and connecting with communities. But we have to build that trust so that these diverse communities, regardless of their socioeconomic class, can feel like they have a place within the institution. Not necessarily, I think, again, about belonging, because for me, not everybody wants to belong, particularly if they're not accepted or valued, or they don't trust the space. So I think that for us as AAU institutions, we need to connect more with that human side and understand that the researchers, the faculty, the students, that we're all human beings. And as human beings, we need to remember that we need that extra coddling sometime, and it's a human rights issue to be able to provide these resources to everyone, but we have to develop that trust first. And I think oftentimes that's what's missing. And as you well know, within a lot of the communities of color, they don't trust the system enough to be able to take the vaccines. So we have our work cut out for us in terms of educating our communities and really providing them with the resources that they need. And I see that as an HSI AAU institution, that has to be one of our future goals, is to continue the work that we're doing, but expand it in a way where we're disaggregating data and not just creating everything as we're all equal and we're all the same. Thank
Glad
you.
you made the point that there is a lot of diversity among each community of color too. They're not monolithic in any way, as everybody knows from your experiences on your own campuses. And data sometimes can mask that rich diversity that's within a particular community as well. So I think that it is really important to keep that in mind. And I think that's part of the intentionality that Bobby and Cindy were talking about earlier. Doug.
I just want to add, and I want to just pose a set of questions that sort of drive what we're doing. And I think the first question is our research serving our communities? And I think it's a question that every institution, every AAU should be asking. Because I think that question hasn't been asked enough. And I think the current context of the COVID has really made it quite imperative that we know what we're doing. I think another area is that in answering that question, we're also answering the question, is our research and creative activity advancing understanding about the multifaceted nature of Hispanic or Latinx communities, right? And furthermore, are we understanding the drivers of well-being? And as most of the panelists pointed out, during the current context of COVID-19, many of our institutions have leaned in to be that primary source of information, that primary point of contact for testing, tracing, vaccination. And here, I think our medical, our College of Health Sciences, the Henry and Susan College of Health Sciences, has played such an indispensable role for a county of 3 million people. They not only have sort of developed these techniques and interventions around testing, contact tracing, as well as vaccination, but also are continually trying to build our capacity to engage communities, because we want this experience to serve as a platform to build on those relationships rather than being a one-off experiences. And one way we're doing that is just through our students. And so, of course, we have a College of Health Sciences with a medical school, public health school, a nursing school, as well as one in pharmaceutical sciences. And I think it's important for institutions in the AAU to sort of see their students as potential healthcare researchers, healthcare professionals, clinicians, practitioners. And so we have a Prime LC program, primary care in the Latino community, that really selects medical students based on their interests and capacity for addressing the unique healthcare needs of the Latinx community. This also has implications for our nursing program, our public health program, as well as our program in pharmaceutical sciences. You know, one area in which many of our AAU campuses are engaged is in our federally qualified health centers. We have two at UCI, one in Anaheim and one in Santa Ana. And it's a major point of delivery for primary care and tertiary care for many members of the underserved community. But I just want to circle back that I think that we benefited as a campus from doing an inventory about the research activity, about advancing understanding about the Latinx communities and drivers' well-being, because it's not enough to react to a pandemic. I think it's far more, I think, beneficial if we start looking at ourselves and understanding what type of research are we engaged in? Are we disseminating it? Are we partnering with community-based organizations? And finally, are our students participating in the research and creative enterprise?
They're all really important points and important questions. I asked this question about the pandemic, of course, because it's on everybody's mind. And you talked about, are our messages being heard? Do people understand what we do? One of the things that we've been doing at AAU is finding, I hate to put it this way, but there is a bit of a silver lining in the pandemic, and that is the public's regard for the value of scientific research. As you probably all know, in some quarters, science is not as highly thought of as those of us who work at AAU universities might wish. But one of the things that the pandemic has revealed is that when people want trusted information about what to do, who do they turn to? They turn to faculty at your institutions because of all the things that you all mentioned about the research that you're doing, about the way you're serving your communities, whether you're testing them, whether you have a medical facility as Bobby does, whether you don't, as Cindy does. You still have all found ways to serve the community. And the public has seen that. And I see anecdotally your experts, faculty members from our institutions, quoted in national publications every day, on the news every single day, because they are trusted, highly regarded sources. And that is an incredibly valuable thing that is going on that I think we need to continue to talk about as we talk about the way we serve our communities, and particularly communities of color, where, as I started with, we have a special obligation because of our distinction in the research and higher education community. Well, let me close my part of the program by asking you all to give some advice to, let's say, your fellow AAU presidents and chancellors, and I promise to pass this advice on, because I can guarantee you that they're all thinking about how to make their campuses more inclusive, how to make their research more inclusive, how to make sure it benefits everybody and not just some people, and certainly not just the people at the top of the socioeconomic scale. What advice would you give to your colleagues who are thinking about how to do this better? What have you learned from being an HSI that can help them as they are working on their own diversity efforts? So I'm going to end with our host, Bobby. And I will start, Sharon, with you, and then Doug, and then Cindy and Bobby.
Well, the advice, oh my goodness, there's so much. But I think that we need to, again, understand that it's important to value others that are in our community, that connects with our community, to accept the different ways of thinking about science so that we can embrace even more diversity and not have individuals come to a space where they feel like they're not accepted and they're going to assimilate. I think we should also work across these different institutions to learn about what has worked, looking at the various cultures that exist at these other communities. So working more together, whether it's just within the UC system or across AAU member institutions at large, to find out what works, what's been valued. Is it something that students are happy with? Do they want more of something? I think we do need to find out more about what our students need that come from the communities that we serve. So I think we need a unified commitment to do this and make sure that we're distinguishing the role of Hispanic, which often for me includes embedded language of the oppressors from political positions of the Chicanx. And I think that's something as we move forward that we really have to think about how these terms and how we play out these terms and the kind of effect that it has.
Doug, advice for your colleagues? Yeah, Doug, advice for your colleagues.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think four things, four questions. I think each member campus of the AAU, when thinking about inclusive excellence, and that includes their aspiration to be a Hispanic Serving Institution, an Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander Serving Institution, a Tribal Serving Institution, a Minority Serving Institution, they should be thinking about four questions. Who is our community? Are they thriving? How do we know and how we can improve? Those aren't the only questions, but I think they're important questions, particularly for institutions of the prominence capacity of AAU institutions. And I think they offer an opportunity for institutional humility as a way to improve, particularly in how we serve Hispanic communities and underserved communities of various sorts. But I think first and foremost, we have to start being purposeful and interrogating our institutions. It's simply not sufficient to be committed to diversity. We actually have to leverage that to become better organizations, more impactful research institutions, and ultimately to redefine what it means to be a great research university.
Cindy, advice for your colleagues.
Yes, so my advice would be that leadership matters. So be visible in your commitment to diversity, to serving Latinx and BIPOC students, and develop leaders at all layers of the organization that share those values. I think we have to be prepared to have uncomfortable conversations about challenging issues and recognize that sometimes we might make mistakes and we just learn from those. I think Sharon mentioned earlier the importance of disaggregating data, that whether that's academic or non-academic data, survey data, faculty and staff demographics, being able to disaggregate that data and then understand the ways in which different groups experience the university. And then as part of that, to listen to our students, find out what works for them and what doesn't, and then turn about solving the things that don't work.
Great advice, thank you. Bobby.
I don't have much to add to that. Each speaker hit on a theme that I was going to incorporate in answering this question. But I would go back to Doug's point about you have to be purposeful and intentional. And Cindy's point is that leadership matters, and it really starts at the top. If you want to really change the culture of your university and your community, you have to be purposeful and intentional. And just the opportunity to learn about the UC postdoctoral fellowship program, because I made many mistakes. So call me if I were giving advice. Call me, and I can tell you about all of the mistakes that I've made along the way. And it wasn't out of a lack of having that purpose and vision for what we could do in terms of increasing particularly the number of faculty members that serve our students, so that they have faculty members who look like them and can be the trusted mentors and advisors. And I think Cindy hit on a good point. Before you can build trust, you have to stop and listen. Listen from the grassroots, and the best people to listen to are our students. Obviously, faculty and staff are important, but the students will guide you to the right place. And putting in programs I think it was mentioned several times about cluster hires, developing the pipeline to increase the professorate, but also coming back to leadership matters. It starts at the top, but building out a team. I could never have made any progress at the university without getting the leadership necessary in each one of these areas, whether it's Provost Folks, whether it's Dr. Cantwell on the research operation, Dr. Franco in HSI, Levi Esquera to help me with Native American Affairs, and then they build teams. And it truly does take a coordinated village of team players to all be bought into the proposition that we can serve our students better by having programs that matter to them. And I want to end by thanking President Snyder not only for being here, but also for including Dr. Ivy Banks, who leads our diversity, equity, and inclusion effort at the University of Arizona on an important AAU committee. And until we got those right leaders, we couldn't make progress. And I'm so proud of what we've been able to accomplish.
Well, thank you all for a really engaging discussion. I think now it's time for us to turn it back to Dr. Franco, who will let the audience maybe ask a couple of questions.
Yes, so we have, thank you, yes. Thank you all so much. So we have time for maybe one or two questions. That was a really great discussion, and so we would love to open it up. If anyone has any comments, thoughts, questions, we'd love to take them. Yes.
So I really like the way that you. I really like the way that everybody described the changes that we need to make on our campuses, especially when we think about faculty mentoring of students and faculty research being community engaged, are really speaking to the health inequities that are out there. But that also means that we need to make changes not only on our own campuses, but also with our peer institutions and with our funding agencies and often with our professional organizations. So I'm wondering what you all are doing now or in the future in your role to affect change in those other areas.
It's probably good to identify who you are. So that's Dr. Andrea Romero, who is our Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, and is doing an incredible job. I failed to mention her as part of the team effort.
It's a great question, and I'll give anybody the opportunity to speak up who wants to. And I'll say something about AAU, but please.
Well, I'll just mention that I think at UC Santa Cruz, one of the strengths of our university is interdisciplinarity. And so I think by coming together and connecting people along really intersectional lines of research, we can both create unique educational opportunities for our students and address the world's biggest problems. And I think if we're able to do that, funding agencies will find that also to be exciting. That work often works with our community members, whether they're community colleges around regional engagements or with peer institutions. And I'll give you one example. We have an Earth's Futures project, which is being led by some faculty in our astrobiology program to really think about not just the future of our Earth with climate change, but also what we'll discover out there in other galaxies about life on other planets. And so there are so many interesting and complex questions that involve our philosophers and ethicists, involve folks who think on our campus who think about creative activities like art and science fiction and literature, but also biologists and astronomers. And so putting together a team like that can help define both new areas of research, but also new ways in which we can seek funding to understand the effects of climate change, but also engage people outside the university to understand climate change and its possible effects on our grandchildren and their children.
We have been working with funding agencies. One of the things that associations can do, because we're not an individual institution, we can raise these questions, I think sometimes more easily than an individual institution might be able to do, about building research capacity in places where it doesn't exist, and having more research capacity in minority serving institutions has been a big priority. And of course, these 4 institutions are an example of a success story, 4 success stories of institutions that have tremendous research capacity and also are minority serving institutions, in this case HSIs. We need to do that more broadly, though, not just with HSIs, but also HBCUs and tribal serving institutions and Asian and Pacific Islander and Native American serving institutions, all kinds of places. We need to make sure that research capacity is broad, because as I said before, research isn't going to be the best that it can be if all the best minds aren't at the table. And that's where we come in.
Well, sadly, we have come to the conclusion of our program. There was such rigorous discussion that it ate a little bit into our Q&A, but I think that it was a vibrant conversation. And certainly, Dr. Snyder, I think you ended on a very perfect note for this afternoon. I want to thank again our moderator, AAU President, Dr. Barbara Snyder. Certainly want to thank our 4 panelists from the University of Arizona and the Universities of California at Irvine, Santa Barbara, and Santa Cruz. And definitely Emmanuel Cadillo from the White House. We thank you for engaging with us this afternoon. Once again, with great honor comes great responsibility. As AAU HSIs, how do we lead innovation, scholarship, and solutions centered on servingness? We look forward to engaging in much deeper reflection on this with the AAU and are poised to shape what this commitment will look like moving forward. There is so much more to come. On that note, I thank you all for being here, and I look forward to gathering with you for our reception just outside. Thank you again for joining us at the University of Arizona's DC Center for Outreach and Collaboration. Thank you.